such a pleasure being here today, and I share with Minister Takaichi the experience of '88. I was telling Governor Dukakis that it was my first trip to the US. I was a young student. I was here for 1 month for the electoral campaign at that time. There's a big difference that I had at that time many hairs ahead, of course. Today it's a little bit different, but for me it was so fascinating to see how the American democracy worked at that time. I'm so pleased because I think the topic today is for all of us a key topic, and to have in this room, in this discussion, different point of views from the US, from Asia, from Europe is fascinating, and it is the real challenge. Because when we come to technology and the role of technology, the relationship between technology and the people and the money and the state, there are differences between Europe, Asia, and the US. Differences that are bringing Europe to be considered a big regulator. In bad way, in good way, we, the Europeans, we think that it is good. The rest of the world, we think that the Europeans are too much heavy in regulations. In the US, the approach is different, but I think it's changing. In Asia, or in some Asian countries, and of course Japan, India, at the very core of this discussion, it is a different approach. So we are here discussing on how to coordinate these approaches, knowing that the rapidity, how fast is the evolution on this topic, and we need to boost and to foster our coordination. I start by saying one point that is, for me, very important. We talk about politics and artificial intelligence today, benefits, risks. The year 23 and the year 22 will be in the world history for one thing, the war in Ukraine made by Russia. And this war, of course, will have a lot of technological topics, the drones, satellites, space, data. But I would like to share with you one thought, one information that is for me crucial. And it is the fact that this war will be also remembered, and it will be in the books of history for one simple reason. One man with his own decision on his personal life changed completely the story of this war. And this man is President Zelensky. Because President Zelensky, in the first week of the war, didn't decide to leave the country. We were all waiting him leaving the country. The first, I think we all remember the first speech of President Zelensky. We were in Europe all convinced that this speech was given in a bunker in Warsaw. And President Zelensky was in Kiev, and he decided to stay, risking his own life. And the change, because of his personal decision that day, was so crucial that today we have to consider that, yes, technology is important, is meaningful, but human being is more important than technology, because the decision of one president changed completely the course of history. And I have to say that artificial intelligence is today, and the way in which this transformative power can change our life, can save lives, can spread opportunities, can find a way to better allocate public and private resources, is first of all unstoppable. So we have to discuss on how to manage it, but we know very well it is unstoppable. So we have to discuss on how to manage it. So I underline this first point in my presentation by saying that this enormous, strong, transformative power is unstoppable. We have to manage the way in which it works, and we have to coordinate among countries, knowing that there are clear benefits. We know very well it improves the quality of our lives, our working experiences. We knew it during the pandemic, and it's so clear. It can augment human abilities. That is another clear issue, and that saves lives. It can foster scientific progress in key areas. In my own city, I come from Tuscany, I come from the city of Pisa. There's the leading center in Italy of robotics for medicine improvement. It can improve decision-making process. So the benefits are there, it is so clear. The risks are also there. Data monopolies, it's a clear risk. And who owns these data? Who owns these monopolies? Surveillance technologies, the other key issue. Cyber warfare, technological warfare, the accelerative impact on labor market transformations with all the social consequences. We know very well that labor market transformations can have a good consequence scheme, but the problem is the rapidity and the way, the disruptive way in which it can happen. And we know very well that today's populisms are feeding by these kind of disruptors. And if they are too fast, without the ability to gradually transform our society and to absorb that changes, the consequences are there. And at the same time, with this difference that I mentioned at the beginning, the role of the market, for instance, in terms of artificial intelligence, tech companies, is so different from the US and from Europe. We know very well that we are considered as the regulators. And we know very well that in Europe we are full of rules put by the European Parliament, the European institutions on how to protect data. But I know that these rules, maybe too heavy, are today under scrutiny in many countries and in many states of the US, because these rules are the only way to avoid that companies can become owners of data of people. And the problem is not having access to my private life. Doesn't matter. The problem is how to take advantage of having all this data. And it is a comparative advantage that the market can allow. At the same time, and this is my second point, we are discussing about this coordination, this discussion among different areas of the world, among different democracies, because Tuan invited us to discuss in a very wide scenario, putting together in this scenario US, European Union, Japan, India, very different approaches. At the same time, we are in this discussion knowing that all these democracies are facing existential threats, as Governor Dukis just mentioned at the very beginning of our conference, regardless of artificial intelligence, before artificial intelligence, because we know very well that there are many issues that are there, even if artificial intelligence is not developing. I mentioned, for instance, polarization, the extreme polarization of our political systems. It is not what we want to have in theory. When we think about democracy, one of the pillars of democracy is the fact that I lose, you win, but I recognize you as winner. And if I am the loser, my role is to recognize you as winner. Otherwise, without this mutual recognition, it is impossible to consider democracy working. We are always in a sort of fight, and this is one of the key issues. Polarization today in our democracies is arriving at a level that is both in Europe, in the US, but also India and Japan are living in very complicated situations. And of course, the rise of inequalities is part of this discussion. It's part of this discussion for many reasons. The reason is related, first of all, to the big cleavage that I feel as the main cleavage today in our societies, the cleavage between rural areas and main cities. When the opportunities are so differentiated and the services, the public services, are so differentiated between what is happening in rural areas and what is happening in the big cities. It is not by chance. I always use this example. You can overlap the map of the vote for Brexit and the map of the recent vote in France, the recent vote in Italy, in the US, in all our democracies. You can check the vote and interpret the vote with this key, the key of the big gap. What is happening in the big cities where big opportunities are there, services are there, openness, people with passport, and what is happening in rural areas, where today, because of the rules, budgetary rules, we need to have a decline in terms of services. We were talking yesterday about healthcare services. In our European countries, the reduction of healthcare public services in rural areas were one of the most important fuel to boost populism and disruptive attitude. The concrete democratic backsliding that is taking place in some countries within the European Union too, but around the European Union, the authoritarian models that are today so attractive, because these models are saying that we don't waste time in discussions, we decide. And in our democracies, part of the people are very much attracted by this discourse. That is, of course, a fake, a false discourse, but it's very attractive. This is why all the discussion about the future of the coordination in artificial intelligence has to consider this four part of the world, the four big democracies in the world, the US, the European Union, Japan, India. The need to link this discussion to a strengthening of democracy and to the way to react to this backsliding or democratic fatigue that we are experiencing. I have to say that another reason why we are experiencing democratic fatigue is also the fact that multilateralism is falling apart everywhere on every subject. The moment in which the United Nations are living in, it's a moment of, I think, the worst moment ever. The difficulty on multilateral discussions on trade, multilateral discussion on the most important topics today, in a moment in which globalization obliges us to cooperate. I asked once the OECD, who is there to coordinate discussion on this topic, to prepare a paper, a research of the cost of non-coordination during the COVID pandemic. The lack of coordination in the first period of the COVID pandemic had a huge cost in human being. I think we all know very well that the fact that we coordinated our countries, even within the European Union, because the European Union was not competent on social issues, on health. Health was a competence for the member states, not for the European Union. But the fact that for the first 2 months, the coordination wasn't there, and the loss of lives because of this lack of coordination was so huge. So we need more coordination. And at the same time, we are in a period in which the political discourse is an inward-looking discourse. Talking about international cooperation within a national campaign means that you lose votes, because people want to have your proposals for them immediately, not in a complex and articulated international cooperation discourse. This is why, and I enter my third and final part, the coordination of the discussions, the toolbox preparation on artificial intelligence is crucial, but it is not enough. If I may say, dear Tuan and dear friend of the Boston Global Forum, and thank you once again for inviting me today and to enjoy your activity and to cross your activity, I think we have to pass from coordination to alliance. Alliance is the right word. We have to create an alliance on these topics. Without alliance, it will be impossible. I know what I mean. I was member of the European Parliament, member of the European Council. I know very well the European institutions. And in Europe, when you don't want to get a result, you say, okay, we create a coordination. In Europe, coordination means blah, blah, blah. If you want to do something, you have to create an alliance. An alliance means missions, tools, toolbox, people, roadmaps, decisions. And this is what we have to do here. And this alliance means also an alliance between public and private, between governments, international institutions, and the business. Because the business needs to have this kind of work. And this work can't be only a work at business level. We need to have a work at institutional level, public level. And this is why on all these topics, I think it is time to get all these results. And my conclusion is that I think we need this alliance between business and institutions, governments. We need to have an alliance with social actors, with civil society, first of all. And we need to have places, tools, brands like the Boston Global Forum able to work in that direction. But my very last conclusion is about my job. I am an educator. I am a teacher. And I think that maybe the most relevant role is for the world of education. The world of education is challenged today by artificial intelligence and by the new technologies. And also we have to consider that the change has to be very fast. First of all, the change, I come from the social science world. And I know very well that all the big challenges today, artificial intelligence, data protection, climate change, pandemic, all these challenges, they need both social sciences people and hard sciences people. It is impossible to give only to lawyers or only to physicians the possibility to run these topics. And this is why it's time for me, for what I think and for what I learn also to my students and to my activity in Paris, in Sciences Po, that we have to work to relaunch in a different way the bridge between social sciences and hard sciences. It is time for this alliance. Thank you, the Boston Global Forum, to working in that direction. Thank you, Governor Dukas.